Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Let's do it.
Today we're exploring a concept that I'm personally fascinated by.
Ikigai.
Ikigai.
It's a Japanese term, and it's often translated as like your reason for being or your life's purpose.
Right, but it goes even deeper than that, doesn't it? It's more nuanced.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're here to uncover today. Our source material this time is the book Ikigai, the Japanese secret to a long and happy life. And I've got to say, it's packed with insights.
Definitely. It's not just about work either, right?
Exactly. And that's a key point. Like, Ikigai can be found in anything that truly gives your life meaning.
Whether that's your passions, hobbies, how you connect with your community, really anything.
Totally. And to illustrate this, the book shares a story about Mitsuo Ai. He was this renowned Japanese artist.
Aida.
Yeah, I get this. He was both a calligrapher and a haiku poet. And his art, it just beautifully expressed his connection to nature, to human emotions. Like, he really embodied Ikigai in his work. It sounds like his art was a lifelong pursuit for him.
Absolutely. And what I find so inspiring about Ida is that his Ikigai wasn't just about creating, right? It was about connecting with the world on a deeper level, finding beauty in the simple things.
People might be listening to this thinking, well, I'm not an artist, but Aida's story shows us that Ikigai doesn't have to be about grand gestures.
Exactly.
It's about finding that sweet spot,
Yeah.
where your passions and your talents meet, where you can make a difference no matter how small.
So true. And speaking of finding that sweet spot, one way to tap into your Ikigai, at least that's what the book suggests, is through this experience of flow. Have you ever gotten so absorbed in something that time just seemed to disappear?
Oh, all the time.
Like maybe you were lost in a creative project, or just having this really engaging conversation, or even like tackling a challenging task at work, but you're completely in the zone.
That's flow, yeah. But it's more than just distraction. It's about being fully present, fully engaged in what you're doing. Think about those moments when you feel truly energized and just completely absorbed. Those are often glimpses of your Ikigai in action.
Absolutely. And there's this fascinating example that the book uses to highlight this idea of flow. Jiro Ono, the world-famous sushi chef.
I've heard of him.
And they talk about his apprentice, who spends years perfecting even seemingly simple tasks, like making tamago, that egg sushi.
Oh, wow. Years.
Yeah, and it's this demanding process, but the apprentice finds a rhythm, a flow in his pursuit of mastery. And it's really incredible. What stands out to you about that?
I guess it shows us that Ikigai often involves a lot of dedication and perseverance. It's not always easy, right? But when you find that flow, the journey itself becomes rewarding.
So well said. And the book highlights research by Owen Schaefer, who outlines these 7 conditions for flow.
7 conditions, huh?
Yeah, things like having clear goals, the right level of challenge, and minimizing distractions. And I think that's a key point. It's not just about waiting for flow to happen, right? It's about creating an environment where flow can thrive.
That makes sense.
And, that means being intentional about minimizing distractions, especially from technology.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Right. Like, when was the last time you put your phone down, found a quiet space, and truly focus on something you enjoy? It could be gardening, writing, cooking, anything that lets you get into that flow state.
Absolutely. And the book even talks about microflow, finding flow in seemingly mundane tasks.
Oh, interesting.
Like, they give an example of an elevator operator in Japan who finds purpose and joy in her work just by greeting people with a smile, making sure they have a pleasant ride, simple things.
Wow, that's a great example. And I think it speaks to the power of finding meaning in our everyday lives. We've got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more on Ikigai, so don't go anywhere. So it's fascinating, right? How we can find these little pockets of Ikigai throughout our day.
Absolutely.
And the book takes us to Okinawa, Japan. Have you ever heard of it?
Okinawa, yeah. I know it's known for, like, the longevity of its residents.
Right. It's one of the world's blue zones.
Zones.
These are areas where people regularly live to be 100 or older.
Wow, that's incredible.
I know. So researchers have been studying these zones to understand, like, what are the secrets to their long lives?
Makes sense. So what are they doing differently in Okinawa?
Well, one thing that really sets them apart is their strong sense of community.
Community.
Yeah, and they have these groups called moai,
Moai.
which are essentially like social support networks. So imagine having this group of close friends who you could always rely on, like share meals with, celebrate life's milestones together. really being there for each other.
That sounds pretty amazing, actually.
Right. Having that sense of belonging, knowing you're not alone, it's powerful.
It must be.
But it's not just about social connection, right?
Right.
The book also dives into some of the daily habits, the lifestyle choices that might contribute to the Okinawans' long and healthy lives.
Like what? Give us the insider tips.
Okay, so one practice that stood out to me is hara hachibu. Have you heard of it?
Hara hachibu. I don't think so.
It means eating until you're 80% full.
80%.
Yeah, so instead of like stuffing yourself, you stop eating when you feel comfortably satisfied.
That's interesting.
It's about being more mindful of your body's signals. And it sounds simple, but I think it could make a big difference in how we approach food.
I can see that.
Any other dietary tips? What else do they eat?
Well, they have a pretty plant-based diet, mostly.
Oh, okay.
Lots of vegetables, fruits, whole grains.
So, lots of variety. Color on your plate.
Exactly. And speaking of variety, what about exercise? Do they have any, like, specific routines?
They don't do a ton of, like, intense workouts.
Really?
But they do emphasize gentle movement, like gardening, walking.
Oh, that makes sense.
And practicing traditional martial arts, things like that.
So incorporating physical activity into their daily lives, but in a way that's sustainable, enjoyable.
Right. Not about pushing yourself to the limit, just finding ways to move your body that feel good.
Yeah, I like that. And you know, this actually connects back to something we were talking about earlier, resilience and anti-fragility.
Quote, I was thinking about that too.
Like, those concepts seem especially relevant when we're talking about longevity, don't they?
Absolutely. So for anyone who needs a refresher,
Yeah.
resilience is the ability to bounce back from challenges.
Okay.
But anti-fragility, it's about actually growing stronger from adversity.
Ah, I see.
The book uses a really powerful example to illustrate this. Japan's recovery from the 2011 tsunami.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You know, even in the face of this devastating loss, the Japanese people, they found ways to rebuild, to adapt, and ultimately to thrive.
It's pretty remarkable. So how can we apply this idea of anti-fragility to our own lives?
That's a great question. And the book suggests creating redundancies in your life.
Redundancy.
Yeah, like having backup plans,
Okay.
diversifying your income streams, your social circle, even your hobbies.
Interesting. So it's like building a safety net.
Exactly. But it's also about being open to new possibilities.
Yeah.
You know, if one path closes, you've got others to explore,
Yeah.
other sources of support and fulfillment.
So embracing change, being adaptable.
Right. Which can be tough, but it's ultimately empowering. And this reminds me of another concept from the book, wabi-sabi.
Wabi-sabi, that rings a bell. Can you remind me?
Yeah, it's this beautiful Japanese philosophy about finding beauty in imperfection.
Oh, okay.
Accepting the transient nature of life, you know.
So appreciating the imperfection.
Exactly, like the cracks, the flaws, they're part of what make things unique and beautiful.
I like that.
It's about letting go of this need for control, accepting that life is constantly changing, evolving, and finding beauty in those imperfections. You know, it's striking me that we've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
Like Ikigai, it's about purpose, sure, but it's also about flow and resilience, connection, and finding joy in present moments. Like, all these pieces fit together.
It is a holistic approach, isn't it?
Yeah, and it reminds us that living a longer, happier life, it's not about some big secret, right? It's about these small, everyday practices.
Exactly. Things that nourish our minds, our bodies, our spirits.
Totally. And the exciting part is it's stuff we can start doing today. So as we wrap up this exploration of Ikigai, what are the key takeaways? What can our listeners actually do differently starting tomorrow?
Well, one simple but powerful thing, I think, is to just start paying attention to the activities that bring you into that flow state.
Yeah.
You know, what are you doing when you completely lose track of time? When you feel totally energized and absorbed? Those are clues, right?
They are. They're pointing you towards what might be part of your Ikigai. And don't be afraid to experiment either.
Exactly.
Try new things, even if they seem a little outside your comfort zone. You might be surprised by what sparks that passion and purpose.
Absolutely. And remember what we were saying about the Okinawans and their emphasis on mindfulness.
Right.
Maybe try incorporating some of those practices into your own daily routine.
Yeah, like the hara hachibu eating practice.
Exactly. Or just taking a few moments to appreciate the beauty around you. Really being present in the moment.
And we keep coming back to the importance of connection, too.
Yeah.
So think about ways to nurture those relationships with loved ones and your community.
Huh.
Like, remember the Okinawan concept of moai?
Those social support networks.
Right. Even if you don't form a formal group, just reaching out to friends, joining a club, volunteering, all these things can help you build those connections that bring so much meaning to your life.
It's about creating a sense of belonging, right?
Exactly. And finally, don't forget about wabi-sabi.
Ah, wabi-sabi.
That beautiful philosophy of finding beauty in imperfection. Don't get caught up in striving for some unattainable ideal. Embrace the imperfections, both in yourself and in the world around you.
The cracks, the flaws, they're all part of the story.
They are. They add character and beauty. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Ikigai, I have a question for our listeners. What's one small step you can take today to move closer to living a life that feels truly aligned with your own sense of purpose?
It could be making a list of things that bring you joy, or calling a friend you haven't spoken to in a while, or maybe just taking a few deep breaths and appreciating this moment just as it is.
Beautiful. And remember, your Ikigai, it's out there waiting to be discovered. It's an ongoing journey, and every step you take brings you closer to a life that feels truly meaningful. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Keep exploring.